would try to emulate her so that they can do as good a job or closer job as Valued Curtis did to this house and this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to pay tribute and to acknowledge the work of our former clerk, retired clerk of the House, Valerie Curtis. When I entered the House as a, younger parliamentarian, I found Mrs. Curtis to be a valuable resource. As all members will agree, those on that side, those on this side, and those who may choose to speak as well as those who would not speak, I'm sure there is general agreement that when you enter this house, you are lost. You are entering a world that is very complicated. Procedures and conventions for which you can only learn by experience. And it is indispensable that you have the staff of Parliament, particularly the clerk and her assistant and deputies, who are able to guide and, I dare say, protect you. And I found that in Valerie Curtis, our retired clerk. I had occasion to travel with her on parliamentary conferences. One readily comes to mind in the Cayman Islands. And I found her there to be very knowledgeable on parliamentary practice and procedures. And I relied on her as a young parliamentarian. I would have had to make a presentation. And I remember working with her the night before to complete my presentation. And she was very helpful. And I'm indeed very grateful for the assistance she gave in helping me to prepare my presentation, which, by the way, was well received and went very well. Yes, and I'm here saying I'm very grateful for her assistance, as I'm sure she would have helped you as well. And I hope you express your gratitude to her. Yes. I also recall on many occasions, Madam Speaker, members, when I served as leader of government business in this House. And again, Valerie, forgive me for being on familiar terms, our retired clerk, was again an indispensable and invaluable resource in ensuring that the order of the House, in terms of its business and procedures, was well maintained. And those were some difficult times, Madam Speaker. And what I can say about our retired clerk's disposition is that she was always patient. She was always very respectful and showed, I think, extreme deference to the members of the House. And that helped because you did not have to worry, Madam Speaker, about the usual considerations of ego and sensitivities when you have to make tough decisions or you need to get to the point to make decisions. So if you were to ask the former clerk for advice or ask her for some documentation or some support, and for any reason you would say, I need this urgently, or I need this now, you would not have to worry about any offense being taken, because she understood the environment in which we operated and made herself available to provide the support as needed. And so I had a good working relationship with her as leader of government business in the House for a few years. As Prime Minister, again, I found her to be quite helpful and, again, an invaluable resource to ensure that the front bench and the various leaders of government business that I would have appointed, that they were able to execute their job in an efficient and effective manner. On her elevation to the post of clerk, I thought it was well deserved. Clearly, she has served this House well. She lifted herself by gaining knowledge and experience, by getting that knowledge and experience certified, and by her works. And her appointment, I am sure, by all members, was welcomed without any reservation. Madam Speaker, you have mentioned that there is a particular administrative matter which has made its way into the public domain and which would have cast a certain unfortunate shadow on a career that has well served this Parliament. Madam Speaker, I note your statements regarding your own respect and acknowledgement of the service of our former clerk. I note the statement made by the leader of opposition business. We join in saying that we too would want her to be here to receive our tributes in person. And you will recall that a few weeks ago, the issue was raised as to whether or not we would do our traditional tribute as we would for any other speaker. And at that time I stood and said, most definitely that would be the case. And in keeping with that commitment, we now rise to our feet to pay tribute. I agree that there should be another event where we are able to speak directly to the former clerk. And I would ask the leader of government business to collaborate with the leader of opposition business to ensure that that special event can be arranged and that the entire Parliament, members and staff, could have that done in short order as well, as soon as the clerk is available. In closing, my tribute to the Speaker, my tribute to the clerk, Madam Speaker. The clerk has given yeoman's service. Nobody questions that. And I think all of us have a personal connection and relation with the clerk. I certainly do. I've known her for more than 20 odd years. And I think we can all agree that what has transpired in the public domain is indeed unfortunate. I would say, however, that in the course of professional relationships, there will inevitably be differences in perspectives. There will inevitably be administrative and procedural differences. But as the speaker said, when it comes to assessing the overall contribution of the individual, when it comes to assessing, and nobody can question that, the commitment of the individual, the contribution of the individual, that we must be fulsome, that we must be forthright. And as our former clerk retires and moves on to other things, we wish her well, and she should know that she has the respect, love, and admiration of the Parliament of Jamaica, which she served unreservedly. Madam Speaker, may it please you.
Thanks, Prime Minister. It would be remiss of me, I was not here to welcome the current clerk. Let me take this opportunity to welcome Miss Lowe, Miss Colleen Lowe, our current clerk, whom has been working alongside our former clerk and myself for, in respect of former clerk, approximately a year or more, and in respect of my own interactions with her for the last 5 months. I wish you all the best in your administration of the back office of Parliament, which many persons have very limited appreciation for the work there, and for your procedural execution in the House of Parliament, and particularly this, the lower house, and the Senate, for which you are going to be responsible. Welcome, Madam Lowe. I wish you all the best. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I too would like to join you in welcoming our new clerk. And I was not here myself when she began her tenure, but I learned of it with much satisfaction and delight, in fact, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we want to formally indicate her presence with us, and to do that, you will allow me to read this particular piece, which I normally don't do, but because I could have spoken of her, because we worked very closely in the last year, and she's been of enormous help to us in so many ways. The Houses of Parliament of Jamaica wishes to announce that Governor General, His Excellency Sir Patrick Allen, has appointed Attorney at Law and Deputy Clerk Colleen Lowe as the new clerk of the Houses. Ms. Lowe's appointment takes effect on Monday, April 18, 2024. Ms. Lowe replaces Ms. Valerie Curtis, who served the Parliament for almost 3 decades in various capacities and proceeded on retirement effective April 6, 2024. Ms. Lowe brings a wealth of legal experience and expertise to the esteemed role of providing high-level support to the functioning of the Houses of Parliament and upholding the highest standards of parliamentary procedure. Ms. Lowe pursued her law degree, LLB, at the University of Hertfordshire and the Bar Professional Training course at the BPP Law School in the United Kingdom. She was called to the United Kingdom Bar Association at Lincoln's Inn Fields in March 2012 and the Jamaican Bar in July 2014. She holds a Certificate of Legal Education from the Norman Manley Law School. She is also the holder of a Master's of Business Administration degree from the University of Suffolk in the United Kingdom. She's also a certified mediator in both the UK and Jamaica. Ms. Lowe is a graduate of Glenmuir High School in Clarendon. During her professional career in Jamaica, Ms. Lowe worked at Lopez & Lopez Attorney at Law and the National Land Agency. Ms. Lowe also worked at the Electoral Commission of Jamaica as a legal officer before she took up the role in the Houses of Parliament as Deputy Clerk in May 2022. We welcome her, and we welcome the breadth of her experience and knowledge, and we look forward to working with her as together we strengthen not just the administration of this great house, but we also enable the practice of democracy as we understand it to be at the highest level under her guidance. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Minister Bartlett, there is one minor. Yeah. Would you like to?
Speaker, she actually commenced her tenure on April 8, not 18.
Thanks, House Leader. Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would like to join in welcoming formally the new clerk to this Parliament. We have seen her already at work, very pleasant, and already showing the capability that all our previous clerks have shown. So we want to welcome her, want to wish her all the best at this time, and indeed the entire staff that she will be managing. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Statement by ministers. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, in the last week or so, this nation lost two really outstanding members of our community, two very powerful ladies who have served in various capacities. One, in fact, was a member of this honorable house, and in fact a member of the upper house as well. I speak in the particular instance, Madam Speaker, of Miss Princess May Laws, who served the Parliament of Jamaica from 1977 to 1989. Miss Laws, or Princess as we always call her, started her political career in the Senate in 1977 and served for one term in that place. She then became a member of Parliament for the House of Representatives, representing the constituency of St. Anne Northwestern in 1980 until she left the House of Representatives in 1989. And I had the honor, Madam Speaker, of being in this honorable house when she became a member in 1980. I do recognize that, and it's to your pain that you missed that opportunity. But it was an interesting period in our history. 1980 was a Renaissance period in Jamaica's history for so many reasons. Indeed, Madam Speaker, deliverance did come in 1980. During her tenure at Parliament, Madam Speaker, Ms. Laws served as Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Youth and Community Development, focusing on women's affairs and children's services. Ms. Laws also had the distinction of serving as the President of the Inter-American Commission of Women, the SIM, and she was committed, Madam Speaker, to ensuring the participation of women at all levels. That felt also, Madam Speaker, that she had the responsibility at the time, as she puts it, to ensure that we would never neglect the development and full utilization of 50% of our most productive resources, our women. And Madam Speaker, I can speak of a particular instance with Princess Laws that might tickle your memories, some of you, a little bit. Because the work that Princess Laws did in building the institutions for gender affairs as we have it today, at that time we called it Women's Affairs, was seminal. And she followed, of course, the good work of people like Peggy Antrobus and a number of others of that era who, along with Beverly Manley, started that whole process of thought leadership in the area of gender activities with particular reference to women's affairs. And she worked assiduously to craft part of what became the United Nations Declaration on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And I recall very well, because I was the Minister of Youth and Community Development then, with responsibilities for women's affairs. And it turned out that in 1984, when the conference was held in Nairobi, and there was a big discussion as to who should represent Jamaica, because it's a ministerial conference. And at the time, Princess was no longer the parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Youth, and she was a member of parliament. And there was a big discussion as to whether a male minister should represent the women at a women's conference in Nairobi. Of course, I had no difficulty saying absolutely not. But the interesting thing is that Princess, in fact, deferred to Senator Jeanette Grant Woodham, who was then president of the Senate and was the most senior woman in our administration at the time. And she went and delivered my statement to the conference. Madam Speaker, Ms. Laws was in fact the first female member of Parliament, but also the first JLP member of Parliament for Northwestern St. Anne. And she defeated our good friend Arnold Bertram at the time and did a marvelous job for Jamaica. The result of that, of course, is that she led the way for now that constituency having a nice, brighter color. Madam Speaker, she served her country well. And she didn't confine her service to Parliament. And I don't want to steal the thunder of any other speaker who may want to speak about her in relation to her service to her church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which she was a cornerstone of in the parish of St. Anne, and of course the Jamaica Union itself, which beyond Jamaica extended into the West Indies. Madam Speaker, today we recall her with great affection, but we recall her as a strong woman who worked very hard, who was diligent in her efforts, and who has made a sterling contribution to the development of Jamaica and our children because of the role she played when she had responsibility for children's services in the Ministry of Youth. May her soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine on her. Madam Speaker, I refer also to another lady of great distinction. She is also the mother of one of our ministers, the Minister of Science and Technology and Transportation. And also, she was the widow of a former minister of this country, Minister of Industry and Commerce, the then Honorable Douglas Vaz. Mrs. Sonia Vaz, an outstanding woman, a fashion designer who made a whole difference in the area of making a special female apparel. And there was a great story that we had about Douglas Vaz then and what he produced, because he was a great manufacturer, a textile manufacturer. And they focused on a very sensitive areas of human apparel. And I tell you, they made a huge contribution to this country. And I want this house to record her as an outstanding mother, an outstanding wife, and an outstanding member of the society. May her soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine on her. And Madam Speaker, we would ask, as in the case of Princess Laws, that the appropriate letter be sent to her family, that a similar one be done to the Vazes, her 3 sons, who we know very well, and of course, her daughter-in-law, who is in this house, Anne-Marie Vaz. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thanks, House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise as well to add our few words of sympathy and appreciation for the life and the work of Miss Princess Laws. As with profound sadness, we too learned of her passing. We acknowledge her as the first member of Parliament, as was said earlier, for Northwest St. Anne. For Northwest St. Anne. She really has left a void not only in the political landscape, but also in the hearts of those who knew her and benefited from her dedicated service. Princess Laws, as was said earlier, broke many barriers, and she made history throughout her career. She exemplified compassion and an unwavering dedication to the people she served. Her advocacy, as was said earlier, for women, children, and the marginalized resonated deeply with many. Beyond her political achievement, she also served with distinction, as was said as well, within the Jamaica Union Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, leaving also an indelible mark on the organization and its mission. As we mourn her passing, we too extend our condolences to her family, friends, and colleagues. May they find solace in cherished memories and the knowledge that her legacy will endure as a beacon of inspiration for generations to come. I would also want, as I am already on my feet, to also recognize the passing too of Mrs. Sonia Vaz, who is mother of one of our own member and colleague. As we toil in the political vineyard, we know just how important family is to us. As importantly, when others are buffeting you from left to right, it is to family that we go for comfort, for solace, and for buttressing us as individuals and as human beings. So to the family, we extend our condolences, and we ask that we all bear the family up in prayers as you are comforted by your memories of her. Blessings.
Thanks to the member from St. Andrews Southwest. Next, opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In addition to the tributes that have been paid already to Ms. Princess Laws and Mrs. Sonia Vaz, which I fully endorse, I want to bring to this House's attention the fact that our colleague from North Central St. Catherine, the Deputy Leader of Opposition Business, has lost her daughter. Madam Speaker, this is really quite tragic for her, and I think at this time it is appropriate for the House to send its sympathies to the member on this tragic loss, and to wish her well in this time of bereavement, and that we will all pray for her so that the grief, which at this time is tremendous, can subside within reasonable time. So we ask for special blessings and prayers for our colleague in North Central St. Catherine.
Madam Speaker, we on this side fully concur with that sentiment. Indeed, I reached out to the member. I sent her a note myself. I wasn't sure how, but I'm very happy that you have raised it so that we can join you in extending our sympathies and to tell her that our hearts are with us in this difficult hour. Our prayers are there for her, and our support is there for her. We love and respect her. And Madam Speaker, I can relate to that because I went through that. I lost my daughter at a time when, believe me, and it pained. My family and I have not gotten over it. So Natalie, I understand, we understand, and we grieve with you. May her soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine on her also.
Madam Speaker, I want to join in conveying sympathies and condolences to the family of former colleague of this House, Ms. Princess Laws. As the leader of government business would have indicated, her tenure started before everyone else except his. And so we never had the opportunity to share with her. But she served this House and for an extended period of time. And against that background, we want to really express sympathies to her family who will have to deal with her passing. The mother of our colleague, as the member from Southwest St. Andrew indicate, in our political journey and out of the limelight of the activities is our family who provide that unseen support that keep us going. I can imagine what the member from West Portland is going through now and his family at this time of her passing. It's one of those experiences that you can never adequately express in words, no matter how much you may try. And I just want to join in conveying to the member and his family that they don't stand alone during this period of grave bereavement. For a colleague from North Central St. Catherine, whose daughter suddenly passed yesterday, we all, as parents, expect our children to bury us, for them to live longer than us, but never for us to have to deal with their passing. And as a parent too, I can't begin to imagine what she's going through. I cannot. I tried to reach her, I didn't. And the truth is, if I'd reached her, I just never know what I would say. I really just don't know what I would say. But Natalie's grief has been compounded because a very, 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 very close friend and political confidant, and all of us in this house know and understand how dear and critical certain individuals are to our political journey. of a political organization. But Ricardo James was more than just a political confidant. He was a personal best friend of hers and her family. She did nothing organizationally without him. She indeed has been central in supporting his family, dealing with the grief. And the gentleman lost his brother the same day. And she has to be carrying those burdens just over the past couple of weeks. And now her daughter. I happen to know that her daughter has been so dear to her. So dear to her. And yes, House Leader, as you said, I recall very well the period when you went through that experience and saw from a distance what you endured for so long. And as you said, you're still going through it. And we can understand that. It is in these times that we really need to stand with each other as we travel this unfortunate journey. May her soul rest in peace for our former colleague, Mrs. Vaz, and the daughter of our colleague, Natalie Garvey. And thank you, Madam.
Thank you. House Leader, sorry, one other member.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The member from Northwest St. Anne is absent and just sent me a message to add, asking me to add a few words of hers of consolation for the passing of Princess Laws, who served as the Member of Parliament for Northwest St. Anne. Princess Laws, Madam Speaker, was not only a pioneer, but she was pioneering, as she broke many glass ceilings and she built many monuments in her constituency. The people of Sturgestown and of Brownstown and Bamboo, people of Lewis and Discovery Bay, will remember her for the many infrastructural development that she brought into their community. They will remember her fondly for the relationships that she developed not only in the community but also in the various churches, which she was a foundation member in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They will remember her for her many outreach programs. But most of all, Madam Speaker, they will remember her of being that sister, that friend in times of trouble, in times of loneliness. They could count on Princess Laws. She was a very calm yet bold person. She was fearless and determined, steadfast, kind. And within the organization that we are all members of, the Jamaica Labour Party, we will remember her for her many workshops, training sessions, engagement, mentoring of young persons within the organization. We will remember her for her steadfast devotion and mission of seeing to the increase of female representation within the party and within the national body politic. Princess Laws, Madam Speaker, will be remembered not only for the monuments, but for the lives that she touched. Madam Speaker, while I'm on my feet, I must also join with others to extend condolences to our colleague from West Portland at the passing of his mother. And many of us know and appreciate the relationship that existed between the member and his mother. She was in many ways, apart from Anne-Marie, his tower of strength. It is often said that boys don't become adults until their mother has passed. And I know that the member would want to continue to be a boy to his mother and keep her alive. Because as the member from Southern St. Catherine said, those of us who would have lost a mother would understand. It's not an easy road. It's not a nice journey. And having lost my own mother some 24 years ago, it still feels like yesterday. So I say to the member from West Portland, in the days ahead, there will be a sharp, sudden pain that will run through the bottom of your stomach and an emptiness in your heart. And there will be a weight on your shoulder. But my friend and brother, let that weight force you to the ground, because it is from the ground, on your knees, you can approach the throne of grace, and it is there and only there you will find comfort. Madam Speaker, our colleague from North Central has lost her child. And the member from Southern St. Catherine said it in so many ways. The English language has 1,020,000 words, and there is not a word to describe the state that the member from North Central is going through. When children lose their parents, they become orphans. But when parents lose their children, there is no word to describe that state of affair. And we can only say to the member, we all stand with you. We are here for you if you just reach out to us. We pray for her strength through these trying times, and we ask that the good Lord stands with her through this period. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thanks, member from St. Mary West. Last but not least, I think I see the mic on for the member from St. Andrew North Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, would like to join all those who have spoken at the passing of these very important people. Important in the sense that they are not members of the House, but their lives impacted immensely on those who they have left behind, who are indeed members of this honorable House. For Natalie, I'm a member of her constituency. I live in her constituency, and the relationship that we have enjoyed over these many years is a very special one. We have shared many enjoyable moments, and we tease each other, and we have a genuinely wonderful relationship. Somebody who I like very much, someone who I admire very much, somebody who I would be very fearful of confronting in any other form other than verbally. But it is fair to say that she is a genuine friend. And we speak frankly about the situation that exists in Jamaica from time to time. So my heart goes out to her. I have not had, God bless, after all these years, I still have my children's, the lives of my children to warm my heart. And I cannot imagine the drama and the tragedy that losing a child constitutes. So, Natalie, my very best to you going forward, and may you be comforted in the knowledge that your colleagues are 100% behind you in your efforts going forward. Princess Laws and I walked through that door at the same time, along with some of the younger chaps who are here still, like J.C. Hutchinson, Edward Warmington, Horace Chang, and others. Princess was a unique individual, very committed to her faith. She's a woman of faith. And she always reminded us of that, and she carried herself in that manner as a very caring, thoughtful, intelligent, committed Jamaican lady. I liked her very much. I found her to be good company, and I was particularly happy to see her in her attempts to improve the lives of those who she represented in Northwest St. Anne. As you have heard, she broke ground by being the first member of parliament for that constituency, and quite frankly, it had become such a traditional PNP constituency that it was quite a dramatic shock to many of us when we actually were able to prevail. So I wish for her and her family all that is good, and be comforted in the knowledge that she contributed meaningfully to this honorable House and through this House to the nation. Madam Speaker, what can I say of Sonia Vaz? Sonia Vaz, to me, was like family. We literally grew up as family. We were very close together, the Samudas and the Vazes. And indeed, it was at her house that most of the strategies that were adopted and employed took place, at her house in Charlton Mews with her late husband who predeceased her, Douglas Vaz. It was a wonderful family made up of 2 loving people with 3 wonderful sons. And for those who might not be aware of it, I knew Darrell when he was a little boy running around the house. That's how long that relationship has lasted. I knew them long before I entered politics. And I've been in this house, unlike the memory or the knowledge of the member who spoke before and pointed out the longevity of the opposition leader of opposition business. But that was over 43 years ago. She was a tower of strength, along with her husband, for the development of her family. She devoted her every awakened moment to doing everything in her power to ensure that they would play their part in the country of their birth and to follow in the footsteps of their father. I know what this means to each and every one of them, to Darrell, to Ricky, to Wayne. I know the deep pain that they are experiencing. Darrell is not somebody who is overtly sentimental. But I can tell you, I know and feel the pain that he is feeling right now. He lost his father. It was a terrible tragedy for him. And now his mother. And all the boys, those 3 boys and their lovely families. I feel for them deeply. And I know that with the support that he has developed internally and externally, he will do well and be able to continue his effort in seeing to it that the contribution to the country started by both his mother and his father will be continued through himself and his brothers and their families. So may her soul rest in peace and light perpetually shine on her. And God bless you all, the Vaz family. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member.
Madam Speaker, a lot has been said. It would be remiss of me not to stand and acknowledge the passing of Princess Laws, who you have heard the accomplishments in politics. But I just want to highlight how kind and generous she was, just as an aunt, as someone who, as a member, as a stalwart of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, as a best friend to Jean Ramsey, who is my second mother, and as someone who, in every interaction as a young boy growing up, was always humble, kind, and open in giving direction and support. She was an extremely loyal person to her friends, and I watched growing up the relationship that she had as an extremely good and strong family friend. And so I want to join in the expression of condolences for her loss and hope that she will continue to be an encouragement and an inspiration to many young women and men who may seek to not just get into politics, but to live a life of integrity and dedication to community and to national development. Let me also, Madam Speaker, join in extending condolences to our colleagues, the Vazis, and the loss of their mother, who would have known me from a very young age, and just to join in the understanding of the pain, and that we continue to pray for your strength as a family as you go through this. Madam Speaker, also, and briefly, I also raise my voice in expressing condolences to our colleague from North Central, St. Catherine, the loss of her daughter, which, I mean, I don't want to ever try to understand what she must be going through, but just to know that we are all here to support and to pray for you. But in particular, Madam Speaker, I want to just acknowledge the loss of who I know as Taz. Others call him Ricardo James. But I had the fortune of being on campus at UA with Taz. And though we were well known as being on opposite sides from then, I can tell you he will be remembered as one of the most genuine, jovial, kind persons that you can find. You wouldn't see Taz and not see a smile on his face. And despite the circumstances, he is one of the persons who I know would never not answer a call. And the same was afforded to him. On behalf of all of us who went to school with him, and all of us who knew him outside of politics, as well as in the political arena, I do want to salute him in his life, and also to express to his family and friends our condolences in what must be a terrible loss, having lost his brother on the same day. I don't even want to understand what they're going through. But for all, Madam Speaker, it is important for us to show a unity in terms of the strength and prayer that we give. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me also add my word of condolences. I had not met Sonia Vaz. However, being one still lucky enough to have my mother and my father, I continue to worry about what it would feel like not to have them around. In respect of my sister, Member Nita Garvey from St. Catherine North Central, no mother wants to even dream about what it would feel like to lose your child. And I'm sure no father would want to be in that situation either. Natalie, please be strong. I do not think there are any words that one could say that would give you any comfort at this time. As it relates to former member of this house, Princess Laws, strange enough, as a little girl, I met Princess Laws. She attended at times the Spanish Town Seventh-day Adventist Church and was a friend of my mother's. So I didn't understand anything about politics at the time, but from time to time I would see her in Ensom City, and she would be interacting with residents, with children, and I always looked up to her as a child. So for all our dearly departed, let us all stand and give a minute of silence in recognizing our condolences to them all. Thank you, members. You may now be seated. House Leader, we're still at statement by ministers.
Madam Speaker, I think there's some anticipation that the sectoral debates would have started today, but I think appreciation is now given to the circumstances that would have enabled us to rearrange the sectoral to begin now on the 30th of April, which will be next Tuesday, when, as usual, I would open and the Leader of Opposition Business will also speak. So for the program today, Madam Speaker, the agenda is indicated, and today is intended to have one statement by Minister, and I would ask you to invite the Minister of Education and Youth and the member from St. Andrew Eastern to make her statement.
Thanks, House Leader. We'll now have the member from St. Andrew Eastern, the Minister of Education and Youth, making statement by Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, please allow me, before I begin my statement, to just add my appreciation for the former clerk. I've had many reasons to interact with her for parliamentary issues, but also on personal matters. And I found her to be patient and always responsive, and I wish her all the best in her retirement years. Let me say as well, Madam Speaker, sincerest condolences to colleague Minister Vaz and MP Vaz at the passing of Minister Vaz's mother. To colleague Nita Garvey from North Central St. Catherine, I cannot imagine the unspeakable agony. Our thoughts are with her, as well as with the family of Princess Laws, former member of this House as well. Madam Speaker, I also want to convey my deepest sympathies and condolences to the parents of 15-year-old Raheel Plummer, who attended Irwin High School and who was fatally stabbed last Thursday. It is devastating for the family, the school community, and Jamaica as a whole. When a child kills another child, it should cause us to look within ourselves as parents, as a community, as an education sector, and as a society. Yes, there may be factors that contribute to the belief among some children that the answer to their frustrations in human interactions is to lash out with violence because they perceive the other child to be the source of their anger and suffering. Teaching children appropriate ways to communicate and behave begins very early, even before school attendance. Children must be taught early by parents and other adults to follow rules and structure their lives for positive achievements. They must be taught nonviolent ways of solving conflicts, and we have several programs in schools. Restorative justice practices comes readily to mind. Our parenting program, guidance counseling, or technical and vocational education program to allow more hands-on training and skills acquisition. Madam Speaker, we regret the loss of a son, a student, a child of Jamaica, and pray that our children will not normalize this egregious and callous act. Madam Speaker, in a bid to further improve the quality of education for the Jamaican children and youth, in 2021, the Prime Minister conferred approval on a commission named the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission under the chairmanship of Professor Orlando Patterson, to conduct an evaluation of the education sector. A report with 365 recommendations under 7 pillars to address the gaps and issues found in Jamaica's education system was published in 2021. This report, entitled Jamaica Education Transformation Commission, the Reform of Education in Jamaica 2021 report, was sent to Parliament for tabling on May 24, 2023. We want to publicly thank all the members of that committee, and there are many, starting with Professor Orlando Patterson, the chair. As you know, he is the John Crowles Professor of Sociology at Harvard University, but he has come out of the Jamaican education system. Committee chairs include Dr. Dana Morris-Dixon. She was the chair of the Governance Committee and chair of the Tertiary Committee. Dr. Jeffrey Hall, he was the co-chair of the Finance Committee. Mrs. Floretta Plummer, the chair of the Technical and Vocational Training Committee. Ms. Erica Simmons, chair of the Infrastructure and Technology Committee. Professor Michael Taylor, chair of the Teaching and Curriculum Committee. Professor David Tennant, co-chair of the Finance Committee. Members of the commission were Dr. Garth Anderson, principal, Churches Teachers College. Professor Eleanor Brown, Professor of Law and International Affairs, Pennsylvania State University. Professor Colin Giles, acting president at the time at the University of Technology. Most Reverend Donald Rees, Archbishop Emeritus of Kingston and Chairman, Ecumenical Education Committee. We also had Professor Maureen Sams-Vaughan, Professor of Child Health, Child Development, and Behavior at the University of the West Indies. Mr. Gordon Swaby, Chief Executive Officer, EduFocal Limited. Mrs. Esther Tyson, former principal, Ardennes High School. And Ms. Trudy Dean, Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister. There were also 32 co-opted members on this committee. Among the findings, the report cited a number of inefficiencies within the education system. 7 pillars of change to anchor the activities to be undertaken were presented in the report, and the activities to address the recommendations have been decided and will be undertaken across an 8-year period, 2023 to 2031. This means that we would have already completed a year. These recommendations have been broken down within the short-term, medium-term, and long-term period in order to guide the implementation process. Consequent to publication of the report, the Ministry of Education and Youth has embraced the recommendations, integrated them in the strategic plan of the ministry, developed an implementation plan with the professional help of Mona School of Business, established a technical team to lead the coordination of the implementation efforts, and established a robust team to ensure the monitoring and reporting on the implementation process. Madam Speaker, the recommendations will be addressed, as I said, over an 8-year period and will impact the early childhood sector all the way through tertiary, guided by the 7 pillars of change or pillars of transformation. And these pillars are, starting with the first one, governance and accountability. Pillar 2, early childhood education. Pillar 3, teaching, curriculum, and teacher training. Pillar 4, tertiary education. Pillar 5, TVET, Pillar 6, Infrastructure and Technology, and Pillar 7, Financing of Education. The Ministry has begun to execute the work on 101 of the 365 recommendations. The first recommendation of the Transformation Report is to have an Implementation Oversight Committee. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to advise that that Education Transformation Oversight Committee has been in place now for some time to monitor the implementation of these recommendations. To date, the Ministry of Education and Youth has provided 3 quarterly updates to the wider Education Transformation Oversight Committee, ETOC, and in turn, the ETOC has convened 3 press conferences to update the nation on the work being done regarding the transformation of the education system. I've sent to Parliament today for tabling the most recent report that ETOC gave to the nation in March 2024. Madam Speaker, another recommendation is that the education sector should have a philosophy of education. And I'm happy to report that the Jamaica education philosophy was finalized subsequent to research and wide-scale consultations with key stakeholder groups. It was submitted to the Cabinet and has been endorsed. Circulation begun within the Central Ministry, and steps are being taken to have wide-scale circulation among all Jamaicans, including circulation in the Ministry's official bulletin to all our principals. And you will hear us as we put some awareness-building activities behind it. But suffice it to say, Madam Speaker, the philosophy of education for Jamaica begins with the words, under God. So under God, the Jamaican education system embraces diverse learning capacities and styles, aiming to nurture each learner's full potential through partnerships. We provide a comprehensive education blending academic, technical, and vocational pursuits with values-based teachings and life skills. Our focus is on fostering community harmony, appreciating our cultural heritage, promoting inclusivity, environmental stewardship, and respect for all. It regards highly competent and responsive educators who exemplify decorum and national values. Through this approach, and in pursuit of sustainable development, we aim to cultivate learners' understanding of themselves and love for country as embodied in our national vision, anthem, and pledge. Madam Speaker, the report, if you look at how it's structured, it lists a number of tables, a number of figures to have the reader get a good sense of the history of the education sector and the numbers that guide it. It was sent to be tabled, but anyhow. The report is tabled. The report of 2021 has been tabled since May of 2023. The report from ETOC. The report from ETOC was sent to be tabled. All right, we'll get that to you, member. Yeah, all right. So the report of the
House Leader, the member's time for speaking has expired.
Speaker, the member's time having expired, I beg to move that it be extended by 5 minutes to allow her to complete her presentation.
Question is that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. Again, the report that was tabled in May of last year, the transformation report, is available to be read and digested. Today, I'm simply opening the debate on it. But even though the report has been laid for so long, I will still allow some more time for there to be any feedback, any thoughts on it. The latest report from ETOC gives the progress on the implementation. And together, if you read the original report, the update from ETOC, you'll get a good sense of where the ministry is with regards to its embrace of the recommendations and the work that is underway to further the implementation of those recommendations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me thank the Minister for the statement and the report that she has tabled and that she has given. As she started, I also wanted to just say a few words as well about the situation at Irwin High and just the tragedy that that is for both parents, families, as well as the school family and the community family. When we have 14, 15-year-olds being involved in such activities at school, it really is something that we can't just pass. We have to stop and look at what it means and what it says. In fact, it wouldn't be the first incident of its kind that we would come here and also talk about, which is also another issue that we need to look at to see how, as a country, we create a different environment that allows our children in schools to act like children and to understand that violence has no place in resolving their issues. So I know that. I'm looking at all the other stuff, Minister, and I thought you also would have included some remarks in what you were saying in relation to the JTA's announcement of commissioning an investigation in the number of our educators and and administrators who have just suddenly died. You know, between January and March this year, I think 10 of them have died. And it is something that is becoming more and more of an alarming situation to many individuals. So I just point that out as well, especially because education can be such a stressful environment, yes? And we want to make sure that if there is anything that can be done, that it is in fact done. But to the report itself, Minister, I thank you for it. I know that there is a member of the opposition that serves on the ETOC and has been participating in the discussions that are ongoing. The question that was asked earlier as it relates to the report was simply because you had noted that today a report is tabled. In looking, we didn't see it, but it is actually the one-year report, which is Transforming Education for National Development, which is actually on the list of documents to be tabled today. So we have no challenge there. We note, Minister, that it is an 8-year journey in terms of the implementation of the recommendations. And we also note that it is divided in short-term, medium, long-term. And so we welcome that. I do believe that we need, outside of the reports, periodic reports, the press conferences, to actually have a national dialogue, yes, as we move to transform education. And we have to find a way to move it from just these one-off press conference or that discussion to a dialogue that engages all of the society, because it has been one of those things across administrations that we have been unable to lift our education, certainly the output from where it currently is. And the success of Jamaica, the prosperity, and I use that word deliberately because I've ceded it to no one and to no party. We want a prosperous Jamaica. For the prosperity that we seek, it requires a different approach to education, and it certainly requires a different output in terms of the education that we engage. So it is something that I would want to see how we have that national dialogue so that we can do that. Minister, I've seen the philosophy of education. As you would understand, it is very difficult to give any in-depth comment, just reading your statement and responding at the same time. I do note, though, and would like to say that
Members' time for speaking has expired.
Madam Speaker, the member's time having been expired and in keeping with the tradition, I will offer, she wants 2 minutes to complete her presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Question is that the member be allowed 2 minutes to complete her contribution. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I just wanted to say that we are, in fact, pleased that the philosophy that we are espousing embraces diverse learning capacities and styles and so on. Of course, that comes with the requirement of resources to be able to accommodate that. I also, the one thing that I would have wanted to see in the philosophy is a commitment to lifelong learning. Yeah, especially given the deficiencies in our system and the importance of second chances to individuals who would have not ended their academic journey with the kind of education that we would want to see. Outside of that, Minister, we welcome that. I would imagine that the opposition is going to take a proper read of the reports to date and also engage in that discussion, because education, we are clear, is the foundation on which the kind of society that we want is going to rest and the prosperity that we would want to see.
Thank you. Member from St. Catherine Eastern.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to join in as well to express my condolences to the parent of Erin High, and not just to Erin High, but also to the number of schools that are now faced with so much challenges in terms of how to manage these education institutions. I want to thank you, Minister, and just to ask, I heard you in your presentation. In your presentation, in respect to opening the debate, I'm wondering if you're opening the debate today or you're going to give it some more time in order that we'll be able. You will give some more time. I'm very happy to hear that. Minister, in light of what is happening now in our education system, and I am certain you understand that there's a crisis, that 8 years period that I'm looking at in terms of the transformation being done, I'm wondering if we could get some more specifics in terms of the breakout. What will be in year 1 or year 2 in order that you know, we could get a better sense of how we would be able to debate. Because since it's an 8-year period, it's really long, and in my view, nothing is wrong with the length of time, but for the period of time over the years that we have been looking at transforming education, by now we should have enough material to be able to start doing some serious implementation. I'm also concerned in terms of how do we fit community development in terms of this transformation. It is going to play a very critical role because to transform education, you have to transform communities as well. And I'm hoping that that will be taken into consideration. In terms of transportation, it might sound foolish, but when we reach to the point where we will be able to have a proper discussion, you will recognize the importance of transporting students to school in a very, very decent way, that it will help to transform education. Because it's not about just chalk and board and about curriculum. It's about attitude and behavior. And therefore, I look forward for that debate, and I would love to be able to participate because I am very concerned about education, because that is the only vehicle that can remove us from poverty to prosperity. Thank you.
Minister?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the contributions, members. With regards to having a national dialogue, I fully agree. And that is why we've put so much effort behind our TREND campaign, Transforming Education for National Development, so that it serves as an attention grabber to get the focus on education. Beyond that, we have been speaking with as many of our stakeholders as possible, but I understand it would be good to just bring the entire Jamaica focused. If we could get a whole virtual session with all Jamaicans, that would be perfect, but we know that's not possible, but we have to figure out a way in which we can get that dialogue from all quarters at the same time. Your observation about the words lifelong learning or the concept not included here, member, it is to be understood though, and in all of our literature, we emphasize the importance of lifelong learning to our children. Member asked about what's included in each year, and given the number of recommendations, it would be best to submit a report laying that out so persons can see how we stage the recommendations. But suffice it to say, member, we have started on 101 of the 365. I only spoke about 2 this afternoon, but we have, and we will lay that out in the ETOC report. You will see evidence of that. And where does community development and transportation? I couldn't agree with you more in terms of transportation as an important input into the education system, because many of us live in Kingston and St. Andrew. Sometimes we don't think about transportation because it's present. You know, there's a JUTC and you pay just a minimum fee to be on it. But for our parents outside of KSA, transportation is a significant variable, a significant factor into their children getting to school safely and back, and on time as well, on time. And I know that the conversations, the consultations are continuing with the Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications, and Transport with regards to how we look at providing more for our children on the transportation front. As you may recall that coming out of the pandemic, we started the train service for our children, Old Harbor, Linstead, Old Harbor into Spanish Town. It's those kinds of activities we want to see. Even now, on an annual basis, we do provide about $300 million for transport support, primarily to our PATH students. But there's more that needs to be done. Thank you for the focus on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. Notices. Announcements. Hold on a moment, please. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House are the following: the interception of communications, amendment of First Schedule Order 2024 and resolution under the Interception of Communications Act, along with its related ministry paper numbered 13 of 2024. The National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024 and resolution under the Minimum Wage Act. The Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2024 and resolution under the Minimum Wage Act. Annual report of the Devon House Development Limited for the financial year 2022-2023. Annual report of Jamaica Vacations Limited for the financial years 2017-2018 and 2018-2019. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Urban Development Corporation for the financial years 2016-2017 and 2017-2018. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Sugar Industrial Authority for the year ended 2018, along with its ministry paper numbered 14 of 2024. Annual report and audited financial statements of the National Irrigation Commission Limited for the year ended 2021-2022, along with its ministry paper numbered 15 of 2024. Jamaica's updated National Implementation Plan for Management of Persistent Organic Pollutants in Jamaica 2023, and its ministry paper numbered 16 of 2024. Bank of Jamaica report on performance and main activities of the Board of Directors for the financial year 2023. Transforming Education for National Development, Year 1 report, March 2024. Attorney General's Chamber's opinion dated July 14, 2023, re-report submitted under Section 36 of the Integrity Commission Act and Standing Order 73D. Attorney General's Chamber's opinion dated November 6 of 2023, retabling of Auditor General's submitted reports. Internal memoranda dated November 7 and 8, 2023, from the Legislative Council entitled Opinion on the Reports on the Public Bodies Submitted to Parliament by the Auditor General, and Opinion on Tabling of Reports from the Integrity Commission and submissions of same to the Integrity Oversight Committee. Integrity Commission report of investigation into concerns that 1, Mr. George Callaghan, former CEO of the Sugar Industrial Authority, made false statements in the statutory declarations filed by him for the 3 years 2018 to 2020. Secondly, Mr. Trevon Clerk, an employee of the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, failed to file his statutory declarations with the Integrity Commission for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021 in breaches of the Integrity Commission Act. Thirdly, Mr. Charlton McFarlane, an employee of the Registrar General's Department, failed to file his statutory declarations with the Integrity Commission for the years 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 in breaches of the Integrity Commission Act. Mr. Dwayne Vaz, a former Member of Parliament, failed to provide information requested by the Commission in respect of his statutory declaration for the year 2019. And finally, Mr. Oral Reed, an employee of the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, failed to file his statutory declarations with the Integrity Commission for the years 2019, 2020, and 2021 in breaches of the Integrity Commission Act, along with their respective indicative ruling. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Bills brought from the Senate. Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 12th day of April 2024, the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Appropriation Act 2024 to exclude all expenditure and for connected matters was passed in the Senate without amendments. Thomas Tavares Finson, OJ, CD, KC, JP, President of the Senate.
Before we go on, the question was asked. I have caused to lay on the table of Parliament the advice of the Attorney General as well as the advice of the Legislative Council for Parliament, which formed part of my review and consideration regarding the process to be engaged when tabling reports of the Auditor General in respect of public bodies. I have also laid on the table the opinions as it relates to the Integrity Commission. This does not in any way set precedents for the tabling of legal advice given to the Speaker in the future. However, as Speaker, my ultimate duty is to ensure clarity and full understanding by the Jamaican people in public affairs. Regardless of my ruling, and the differing legal perspective provided as it relates to reports of the Auditor General, they have all been tabled, and I will continue to table the reports accordingly to previously established practice for the time being. Nevertheless, in the interest of good governance, I urge this House and strongly urge this House to act quickly to review the relevant legislation to remove any ambiguity or gaps in the process. Thank you. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Just note that the list here that was provided of the items that are being tabled today do not include the opinions to which you have referred. So this is an incomplete list then, is it, Madam Clerk, and we'll be getting a complete list of what's been tabled?
I asked the clerk, she will address you, she will speak to you. She did an amendment, so she will update accordingly. Notices of motions given orally.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice at the next meeting of the House. I move the following motion on the interception under the Interception of Communication Act. Interception of Communications Amendment to First Schedule, Order 2024 Resolution. Whereas under Section 18.1 of the Interception of Communication Act, the Minister may by order add to or delete from the list of offences contained in the First Schedule. Whereas under Section 18.1 of the Act, the Minister made the Interception of Communications Amendment to First Schedule Order 2024, and whereas it is provided by Section 18.2 of the Act that an order made under Section 18.1 shall be subject to affirmative resolution, And whereas it is desirable that the interception of communication amendment to first schedule Order 2024 be affirmed. Now therefore resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the interception of communications amendment to first schedule Order 2024 resolution. 2. The interception of communications amendment to first schedule Order 2024 is affirmed. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice at a later stage today I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you. Minister, turn your mic off. Minister Chang, turn your mic off, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions under the Minimum Wage Act. The National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024 Resolution, whereas by virtue of Section 3 of the Minimum Wage Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, by order published in the Gazette, fix minimum rates of wages for any occupation in the island, either generally or in any specified area, place of district. In any case where the Minister is satisfied that the wages being paid to any persons employed in any such occupation are unreasonably low, and may, if the Minister is satisfied that it is desirable so to do, fix a national minimum wage applicable subject to the provisions of that section to occupations generally. And whereas by virtue of Section 3, subsection 3 of the Act, the Minister may by order vary or cancel a minimum wage, and whereas on the 18th day of April 2024, the Minister made the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024. And whereas Section 3, subsection 5 of the Act provides that an order made under Section 3 in relation to a national minimum wage shall be subject to the affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives. And whereas it is desirable that the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024 resolution. 2. The National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024 is affirmed. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, relating to the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2024 resolution, whereas by virtue of Section 3 of the Minimum Wage Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, by order published in the Gazette, fix minimum rates of wages for any occupation in the island, either generally or in any specified area, place of district, in any case where the Minister is satisfied that the wages being paid to any persons employed in any such occupation are unreasonably low, and may, if the Minister is satisfied that it is desirable so to do, fix a national minimum wage applicable subject to the provisions of that section to occupations generally. And whereas by virtue of Section 3, subsection 3 of the Act, the Minister may by order vary or cancel a minimum wage, and whereas on the 18th day of April 2024, the Minister made the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2024, and whereas Section 3, subsection 5 of the Act provides that an order made under subsection 3 in relation to a national minimum wage shall be subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, and whereas it is desirable that the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Act Order 2024 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2024 resolution. 2. The Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2024 is affirmed. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice?
I note that there is no sheet with question and answer tabled. Is there an explanation for that?
Madam Speaker, just to respond, I think there was a situation, it seemed, that we have to remedy in relation to the rollover. I think that there was an omission in terms of the resolution itself, which obviously had omitted questions and answer to questions. So we will rectify that to ensure that all of those questions would yeah, well, the fact is that it became available to me only today, so we will rectify it.
Member, you're satisfied with explanation from House Leader?
Fine, but I'll live with it for now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Member. I wondered, Member, because the usual mode would be for the questions that fell off the order paper to come back for us to replace on the agenda, and I have not yet been in receipt of same. Thank you very much. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House, motion for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained, public business, House Leader.
It is intended to have the completion of the debate with regards to the national minimum wage, Order 2024 resolution, which was tabled and presented by the Minister of Labour and Social Security, as well as the completion of the debate on the offences against persons, a continuation. Yes, the member is saying a continuation of that debate. And of course, the Minister of National Security will debate and have completed the inception of communications amendment to the first schedule, Order 2024, in the public business. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Minister of National Security, you'll go first.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motion up, which I gave earlier notice.
All in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
The matter for tabling in the House of Parliament is the interception of communication amendment to first schedule, Order 2024. The order and the interception of communication amendment to first schedule, Order 2024 resolution. The resolution, the order and the resolution is being tabled to amend the first schedule of the Interception of Communication Act 202 by deleting paragraphs 7, 8, and 9 and renumbering the paragraphs of the schedule accordingly. The Interception of Communications Act 202 came into operation on March 15, 2002 to provide for the interception of communication sent by means of telecommunication network and for connected matters. The Act was gone through a number of amendments, 205, 206, 209, 2020, 2021, 2013, and with the latest amendment in January 1, 2015. The amendment removed the reference made in the first schedule to the Firearms Act 1967 and substitute same with the Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulation Act 2022. This amendment is necessary to enable authorized officers, as defined in their legislation, to apply to a judge in chambers for a warrant authorizing the interception of communication of persons to prevent or detect offenses against the firearm legislation. The amendment provides access to the new offenses created by the legislation and manages the risk of denial of application to the court for intercept, based on the judge forming the view that offences under repeal legislation do not correspond to the law that is in force. Madam Speaker, I seek the members to affirm the resolution, the order, interception of communication amendment to the first schedule order 2024.
There are no other members to speak. The question is that the motion be approved.
Madam Speaker, it stands to reason that this amendment to the schedule of the legislation dealing with intercepts should be amended to add to it the provisions that are being added here in relation to firearms offences. I assume, the Minister didn't say it, I don't think, but I assume that the schedule previously had the Firearms Act in it. Under the old title, it had it. So essentially, this is just, as it were, bringing current that list to reflect the current legislation as opposed to the legislation that existed up until last year. So it's uncontroversial and has our support. Yeah.
Thank you. Minister?
Thank you. Now move that the House affirms the order, the interception of communication amendment to first schedule order 2024.
The question is that the motion be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Thank you.
So that is Minister of Labour and Social Security.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions notice of which I gave earlier.
Thanks, Minister. Those in favor? Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. Madam Speaker, today I rise to speak on the matter of the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024 and the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2024. The Minimum Wage Act stands as a pillar of our labour legislation framework and serves as this Parliament's acknowledgement of the pivotal role workers play in societal progress. Enacted in 1938, this legislation underscores the government's commitment to safeguard workers from substandard earnings. Essentially, Madam Speaker, the Minimum Wage Act embodies a commitment to upholding workers' rights, promoting fair compensation practices, and fostering a conducive environment for the advancement of both employees and our society. Section 3 of the Minimum Wage Act enables the Minister of Labour and Social Security to establish minimum wages through ministerial orders for occupations where wages are deemed unreasonably low, establishing minimum standards to ensure that low-income workers receive fair compensation. This provision empowers the Minister to set standards that protect workers from exploitative compensation practices. Madam Speaker, as the Minister of Labour and Social Security, I oversee the implementation of this Act, which has significantly impacted the lives of workers in various sectors. Over the years, we have introduced various orders under Section 3 of the Act, including the National Minimum Wage Orders, which is used to set a wage for all sectors, including our domestic workers, and the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Orders, which is used to fix a minimum wage for persons employed as security guards to organizations who provide industrial security services. Madam Speaker, I am committed to upholding the principle of fairness, fostering economic stability, and promoting the well-being of all stakeholders within our labor force. With that in mind, it is in the execution of that function that I rise to table for debate and affirmation an increase in the minimum wage. Consequently, I hereby ask that our Honourable House affirms the following increases which are to come in effect on June 1, 2024. 1, the national minimum wage is to be increased from $13,000 per 40-hour work week to $15,000 per 40-hour work week. This means, Madam Speaker, that A, the single-time rate is to be increased from $325 per hour to $375 per hour for work done by the worker during any period not exceeding 40 hours in any week. 2, time and a half is to be increased from $487.50 to $562.50 per hour for work done in excess of 40 hours in any week. And double time is to be increased from $650 to $750 per hour for work done by the worker during any period on a rest day or on a public holiday. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, the minimum wage for industrial security guards is to be increased from $14,000 per 40-hour work week to $15,000 per 40-hour work week. For the single-time rate, it will be increased from $350 per hour to $375 per hour for work done by the worker during any period not exceeding 40 hours in any week. Furthermore, time and a half is to be increased from $525 to $562.50 per hour for work done in excess of 40 hours in any week. And double time, Madam Speaker, is to be increased from $700 to $750 per hour for work done by the worker during any period on a rest day or on a public holiday. It is important to clarify, Madam Speaker, that the wage increase for industrial security guards applies solely to the basic rate. As such, this increase does not currently encompass any adjustment to allowances and insurance benefits. Subsequently, the prevailing rates will remain. The laundry allowance remains at $52.38 per hour. The firearm premium allowance is at $57.15 per hour. The dog handler's premium allowance will remain at $39.29 per hour, and the life insurance coverage with double indemnity protection and dismemberment coverage will remain at $3,273,000. Last year, Madam Speaker, colleagues, a commitment to equalize the national minimum wage and the minimum wage for industrial security guards was made. That commitment was made and has now been executed, Madam Speaker. Let me reiterate that the minimum wage stands, as it says, as a minimum basic standard. And I want to use this opportunity to appeal and to strongly urge all employers, particularly those with the means to do so, to offer their workers compensation that exceed the minimum threshold. And I want to use the opportunity as well to applaud all of those employers who are already doing so. And we should all be aware of the challenges faced by the workforce. And so it is important, Madam Speaker, to do so and to demonstrate a resolve in creating a decent working environment and to offer support to advance the sustainable development and productivity of our labor force. Madam Speaker, I now seek the affirmative resolution of this Honourable House in relation to the National Minimum Wage Amendment Order 2024 and the Minimum Wage Industrial Security Guards Amendment Order 2024.
Those in favor? Aye. My apologies, member.
Accepted, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wanted to just make a few comments in relation to the statement made by Minister and the amendment that is before us, if I'm allowed. So one, you know it would be remiss of me not to once again, Minister, speak about how important it is for the Minimum Wage Advisory Commission to really be part of the discussion and other stakeholders in setting the minimum wage. We agree with, we accept, we welcome the increase, but we also believe that the process is important, and having that kind of stakeholder dialogue is certainly important. I also want to say, Minister, that more and more countries are moving from minimum wage to look at livable wage, and I believe it is time as a country for us to begin to look at that as well. The last time I mentioned something about a domestic helper in Parliament, there were some of my colleagues on the other side who went on their political platform to make a joke and fun about it, saying that I was talking about my own domestic helper. I'm not going to allow that from preventing me from standing up and talking about what is happening in our household helpers community. And so, Minister, I want to place on the table, because you did not raise it, but when I speak to domestic helpers, one of the questions they ask is how to deal with issues where they are paid minimum wage, but things like meals and accommodation are also subtracted. And I'd like to hear your comments on that. As it relates to the security guards, Minister, I think we have to go beyond lip service when we talk about upholding principles of fairness, economic stability, and so on. And I believe that the government has not done well by the security guards in the way they could in making sure that breaches and excesses are not still continuing, in particular as they moved from where they were before to be considered as workers, and with the gap that is still left unattended by many.
Thank you, Member. Minister?
Thank you for the comments. I can assure you, Member, that as it relates to the Minimum Wage Advisory Commission, all that has been announced is in accordance and alignment with their advice. As it relates to the issue you raised regarding domestic workers, I'd love to get some specific details. But as you know, I mean, Jamaica stands tall globally when it comes on to the work that we have done and continue to do in relation to domestic workers. And we at the Ministry of Labour and Social Security take that very seriously. So I look forward to some specific details, and we can address those matters for you. As it relates to the industrial security guards and the gap, this government can proudly say, and I think it is evident in terms of the action that has been taken, that we have done significantly in terms of confronting the real, relevant, and difficult issues in relation to security guards. And there is still robust discussion taking place, which we can assure you that we have all intention of ensuring that the interest of the industrial security guards continues to be paramount. It is obvious in the fact that we are the ones that have raised and fulfilling the commitment to raise their wages and to also address the issue as it relates to the circumstances of their contracts. And all of those issues continue to be addressed. We have the LAC where we meet consistently, the Labour Advisory Council, and we have those robust discussions. But again, I thank you and I welcome further discussion on these specific issues with you. And hopefully we can have an opportunity to sit down further to get some more details on the concerns you have.
Minister, would you be so kind as to move the motion again?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I now ask that the motions as read before now be approved.
Thank you, Minister. House, the question is that the motion given previously be now approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Next, we'll invite the opposition to make its contribution in respect of the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Act 2023 and the Offences Against the Person Amendment Act 2023 and the Child Care and Protection Amendment Act 2023. Thank you. The member from St. Andrew South Eastern will be first to present.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't see the minister. Oh, he's coming in. You're well refreshed from downstairs. Madam Speaker, I stand in opposition to what has been proposed in this law, and I'm going to outline the reasons. First, there's no evidence that has been provided that judges have been applying what I call the light touch in sentences to persons who have been convicted of serious crimes, and murder in particular. Second, there is no evidence that harsher sentences are a deterrent to criminal activity. None. Third, evidence. Third, I would say the mischief that is trying to be resolved by this legislation exists, where if you believe that a sentence is insufficient for the crime committed, the prosecution has the right to appeal that sentence. And the prosecution can. And the prosecution has appealed sentences and have gotten longer sentences. But, Madam Speaker, this legislation is bad on a number of grounds, apart from those. It does not address the critical reason why we have violent crimes. I believe what we are trying to do is to give the impression that we are tough on crime without dealing with the causes of crime. And in particular, for those persons who are 18 and under who commit violent crimes. And there are a myriad of reasons. I have never been someone in support of removing judicial discretion by minimum mandatory sentences. But I think it is even more important to retain it when you are dealing with persons who commit crimes as children, under 18, because the circumstances which give rise to those criminal activities are very different from adults. And there are a plethora of reasons. We know that we have an education system that turns out children at 15 and 16 who are barely literate or numerate. And that impacts our crime rate because they become recruits for gangs. We know how poor socialization impacts young people. We know how the inability to determine whether there are behavioral challenges at a young age. So whether young boys have ADHD or other things, they can't do assessments, they can't be treated. Those are the things that are impacting crime at a young age. What the minister is going to do with these minimum mandatories is to clog up the court system, because nobody is going to resort to wanting to settle before they go to a trial. There will be no pleas. So you're going to create a backlog in the court system, which means that people who commit other crimes going to have to wait years and years before their court cases can be heard. And then also, you're going to clog up your jails. And your prisons, sorry. This does not address the root cause of the problem. I'm going to urge the minister and those on that side. You have the majority, so you can pass it. But don't pass more bad legislation. It is not dealing with the critical issues in the country. Let us get tough on the causes of this crime. We don't have any coordinated social intervention program in the country. Foolishness. You have outsourced it to Project Star. You tell me you have rolled it up into ministries. Tell me who I can call when I have a problem in my constituency. There is nobody. None. There is nobody. Implement it. Don't tell me implement a comprehensive social intervention program across the board so that those youngsters who fall out of the system have a second chance. Yes, you have heart, but you need beyond that. I am saying let us focus the energies not in legislation to increase minimum mandatories, particularly for youngsters 18 and under. Under 18. But deal with what gives rise to the criminal activity. Jamaica have a violent problem. We have a high crime rate. This is not going to solve it in any way, shape, or form. It is going to backlog our criminal justice system. It is going to put more people in jail. You're going to reduce the possibility for rehabilitation. And I'm really focused on those 18 and under. It's different for adults, but there are many issues that give rise to 18 and unders committing crime. This will do nothing to solve the problem. And in the same way, we passed the Ombudsman Act to incorporate it into EOJ, and it's been an absolute failure. Nothing happened in the local government election. Absolute failure. Let us not go again and pass bad legislation, which will have a negative impact and not deal with the root cause of the problem. This does not address the root cause of the problem.
I think Minister Chuck will respond to the issue of the need and the quality of legislation being passed, but the member have made some comments I have to respond to. The question of dealing with the root cause of crime is an issue that this government has taken very seriously and has done more than any other government in the past. Absolutely any other government. The concept of, I will give you full information. Madam Speaker, the tradition of using projects to invest in social intervention was shown by all the researchers to have failed. Not on the huge volume of what 300 million spent, and in some small alleged NGOs, because the government funded them, PMI and a number of others, which are small offices, couldn't serve the community. But the project funding that was used along the way, all indications that over 70% of the funds went to parallel staff, consultants, researchers, and very little reached the source of the community where the people are in need of it. It's a fact of research. Fact of research. I didn't say it. The Capri study did. Today, we have moved that. We have moved it into a coordinated approach and establish an effective management, monitoring, and evaluation system. So, funds being directed to the agencies, members are asking. We can give you the data, and we'll do so in due course, but I have to comment tonight. The issue, for example, of the most recent program on the security plan, which dealt with interfacing with parents, interfacing with the hard training program, the hundreds of thousands hard training program was done, focus on zones of special operations. In addition to that, providing psychosocial support. We have already trained over 40 psychosocial aides in communities across critical areas. That is far more than was involved in any of the NGOs you had. It happens that they are concentrated in specific areas and will expand it and scale it up nationally. The Ministry of National Security has taken our social services. We are designing programs, intervening in specific cases, and moving out. You have a case manager in Southwest St. Andrew, and you know her. She operates in Haile Selassie. And that has no difference. Right? Right? And there are several case managers, far more case managers were there before. We have some 30 of them now and will be taking on more this year. The psychosocial aids are crucial to, in fact, dealing with what you refer as the root cause. Now, until you can find the families and deal with them and deal with the emotional trauma there, you're not going to have any change. Just providing some handouts does not help. Well, that's what you're doing before with that is. Right? Right? That's what was being done. right? Now, we have trained people. Our case management operation is now being looked at internationally for best practice. And the case managers are designed to, in fact, reach the individuals, identify not only the person involved, but the entire family, and bring to bear the other social services of government, from PATH to training in heart, and the other activities that we require to pull them out of poverty and change society. The data will be provided to this House in due course, but that has moved aggressively. You will get it when I think it is necessary to give you. Okay? I have the data. It is monitored by the relevant agencies, including PIOJ and international agencies which are in partnership in funding. We have moved directly into ensuring that the services to the communities are the best. The poor communities deserve the best service. That's just a fact of life. Right? There's reference to, we'll do it. We are following up now with the interministerial program, which we work in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. We're currently in 35 schools, in which we do a comprehensive review of the problem in that school. The case managers are assigned, the psychosocial aides are trained, along with the guidance counselor, to identify the young individuals who are currently challenged and to move them in appropriate services to direct them away from crime and other social behavior. That is providing a model to expand and scale up as we go through. 35 schools. The projects you refer to often weren't even one school. I had a big office in Montego Bay, one psychiatrist. He was downtown, nobody went there to them, right? Absolutely nobody. And calling somebody to talk to people about that is not the answer. Your PMI program did nothing, right? All the other programs you're talking, right? They're nothing more comprehensive than the current approach to case management and district management under the zones of special operation, the school program, where the school becomes a center of a district. In addition to that, all the areas, you have 7 zones, which is partly the focus, and the other 105 communities which have been identified by the PIOJ areas where we are looking at intervening, and will do so in a systematic manner. Just acquiring a large number of people and putting them on the road is not the answer. In addition to that, we have developed an effective risk assessment tool that's also been accepted now internationally as a best practice tool. We had none of that before. Neither the case managers nor the risk management tool. Those are issues which I bring in details to the House. The risk management tool decides the district to go to objectively. And that we are proceeding along the line. We are working now to provide a data center where you have a commonality of the data acquired to be able to, in real time, evaluate the impact of the work in the communities we are dealing with. We have spent billions of dollars, and crime went up and up and up, despite of those programs referred to by the member from Southeast Central. It was, during that time, huge sums were being spent on your social intervention programs. Nothing was done to bring crime down. Where we are operating, in the districts we are operating, the impact is showing. I'll bring the data to you, and we'll scale them up. The ministry is not taking over social services. We are coordinating and collaborating to ensure that the relevant agencies, health, social security, education, labor and social security, their funds will be spent appropriately and efficiently, and we will provide the data if we so wish. But there's a comprehensive, holistic approach, which is monitored by the highest level, at the highest level of government, the permanent secretaries, etc., to ensure that money goes where it should go, the people who are in need of it get the money, and in the end, we are monitored by the City Security Secretariat. That has been objectively and professionally, and providing the kind of service that was never done before. Right? So, Madam Speaker, I just make a note of it. In due course, you'll get it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The truth is, this debate didn't start today, and it's going to continue. Yeah. A part of the problem must be, Minister, that it would be helpful if in this whole discussion, the evidence such as it is are produced. Because on the one hand, there's a view that it's an experimentation that is being done, when perhaps what is needed, if a new program is being developed, it would naturally need time for certain things to happen. But in the meantime, it would help if what comes along with the discussion is the evidence to support some of the actions that are being taken. The time that is needed for certain things to occur and for certain things to work, new programs, new ideas to germinate and to work, is the time in which persons are wanting to understand exactly what the benefits are and what will be achieved by this new program. When you bring legislation of this kind in the interim to impose punishment on particularly young people, it raises all kinds of concerns, because the warehousing of people become one of the prospects of what people are concerned that is being done. The second chance that most persons get in life, particularly young people, is not given to some of those individuals. And yet we are proceeding at a pace that have implication, not just for the individual involved, but for the criminal justice system itself. The whole matter of plea bargain is now interrupted, and so you have to, when you come to close, Minister, you need to explain how that works, right? But the point has been raised that if you now clog the system, we already have a challenge system, you clog the system, then you allow some more hardened criminals, some of them with recidivism rates that are high, to escape because your system is so clogged, while you're putting attention on the young people who should be getting whatever benefit is necessary and certainly supported by the evidence. So it makes the conversation very difficult, because on the one hand you're saying we're doing something, but we need time for it to germinate and for the benefits to be clear. On the other hand, you're acting in ways that are seemingly to heap punishment on particularly young people, and one of the implications of it is that the system gets so clogged that you're not moving on, and you're taking your attention off the hardened criminal. So there are a number of issues there that are real in communities, some of which I represent. We start with a failing school argument, right? And so you have people who did not benefit from the current education system. And you have the other issues. We talk about the psychosocial. I don't know of one of those in the constituency that are of concern to me. I don't know of one. And I'd love to know. And the minister knows that I've been arguing for other kinds of support and attention in certain of those communities. In the meanwhile, we're waiting for Zozo and some other things to catch up with the problem. So the problem is bigger than Zozo. Way bigger than Zozo. And the impression is being given, Minister, that what the government is doing is heaping punishment on people who concerns are real and need to be addressed. That's the impression that is being given. And of course, the age-old issue about taking the judgment from the judges themselves is a problem. So we have problems compounding problems in this particular area. And I urge you to think about it very carefully, because no one is soft on no crime. That's foolish. People are saying we want to get to how do we really solve it? So there's a problem. Everybody agree on that. How we solve it is the points of disagreement, and there's genuine disagreement. And the point is data can help us, certainly help me. That evidence-based and data-driven is what I've been preaching for years. evidence-based and data-driven. In the absence of that, you wonder if it's just no more experimentation and pressure from the public, or we're just trying to do a thing. We're saying we're acting and we're tough on crime. We're getting tough on young people. And I don't know what the longer-term consequence of that is going to be. So, Minister, I'd like you to really consider this thing. And there shouldn't be no rush to judgment on this. If there's a need to go back and look at the thing and calibrate it, please consider it, because now is the time to do it. Not after we passed it and we see that it is the impact or the unintended consequences other than we intended.
Madam Speaker, I'm not proposing to rehash the debate that has already taken place in the committee that would have reviewed the proposed amendments. But some points have been made which are valid points. Concerns have been raised, particularly by the member from St. Andrew South East, which, like that member, I have communities of similar profile and indeed would raise similar concerns. The member's pointed question is that where do I go if there is a flare-up of gang activity in my constituency? It is a question that members of parliament who have inner city communities, who represent particularly in urban areas, and more so now we are seeing a spread into rural Jamaica, that gang activity, particularly involving young men, is a growing concern. The government has to take a comprehensive approach to treating with the issue of violence, and specifically youth in violence. I want to inform the member that when it comes to gang activity, flare-up in communities, especially if it involves youth, yes, you may need social work intervention. Yes, some of the youngsters are probably misled. Some of the youngsters are probably from broken homes. Some of the youngsters may have been diverted into a life of crime. And it requires clinical, sometimes, intervention, psychological intervention, and for want of a better term, a kind of social support, social work kind of intervention. There are many agencies of government that provide that kind of support. But outside of that, if it is that the member is saying that in his constituency there are young men involved in criminal activity that is causing a flare-up, then the first port of call would be the police, the police community safety branch. And they have well-trained, specialized skills in intervening in these kinds of situations, not only from a policing perspective, but many years ago, the call was, we need to invest in community policing. And we have invested significantly, substantially, in developing community policing. Hold on, we're coming to all of those, because we have to stand up and dispel the false narratives. We have invested heavily in increasing the capabilities of our police force, in not just to respond in a unidimensional way. That's number one. Once and we have seen this all the time, every member inside here, at some point in time, if they have had a gang flare-up, would have been invited by the police commander, come let us have our community group meetings. Come let us have the community walks. I have participated many times, and I'm sure that, exactly, member, so have all of you. Then how could you stand up and say that there, where do you go to? How could you stand up and say that? No, Madam Speaker, the police. Let me address that. So, it is not accurate, and I'm being euphemistic, to say there is nowhere to reach out. The appropriate place where the intervention for criminal activity, youth deviance that is aligned with criminal activity is in the police. That's number one. Outside of that, Madam Speaker, once the police are aware of the nature and profile of the young people, because the member raised the issue in a particular context, is concern for young people, particularly those below 18. That's my recollection of what you said. Now, once the profile of the problem has been established, and they have dealt with the criminal element, and they have established safety, then they move now to the case managers. They have, again, specialized resources in the police force. Again, not unidimensionally focused on just merely policing. The numbers, we must admit, would not be appropriate and sufficient to the magnitude of the problem. But I would say definitively that the numbers are increasing and the investment to support them is increasing. And that is without question. Those case managers, along with other resources, including the justice centers, including support from JISTV, all of them come together to focus on the community. Now, if the situation rises to the level, Madam Speaker, where it has been established that the intervention requires more than regular policing, then we would declare a zone of special operations, which we have done, and they have been successful in the communities that have traditionally flared up. And it has worked effectively, without question, Madam Speaker. And that brings together all the state agencies that focus development support in the communities. And I have gone through in my budget presentation and listed all the interventions and the massive budget that has been spent on community intervention, on youth intervention, and all the interventions, the social interventions. Now, bear in mind, Madam Speaker, bear in mind that outside of the zones of special operations and the efforts of the security forces, the problem of unattached youth is one that one of the greatest methods of intervention for unattached young people. Yes, they need guidance and they need the social work, but you know what? Madam Speaker, member from Southeast, they also need work. Their hands and minds and hearts need to be engaged. And that is why this government stands proudly to say that we have cut significantly, in more than half, youth unemployment in this country. Unattached youth in this country is at the lowest level it has ever been. And we announced recently programs that will pull in our unattached youngsters who have been idle in communities for a long time. Our youngsters have now more opportunity to be integrated into the mainstream of the society and find meaningful employment. This does not say, Madam Speaker, that we still do not have, as every society would have, a problem with youth deviance. Youngsters who are misguided, youngsters who have psychological problems, youngsters who fall in conflict with the law for whatever reason. That is why we have put resources into the CPFSA. We have enhanced the capacities of both the Justice Center, but more so the Ministry of Education through schools, right? We have made a massive investment, Madam Speaker. One of the most advanced intervention capabilities in the therapeutic center, which we have built at Maxfield, is it Maxfield Park Children's Home. In effect, Madam Speaker, we intend to expand this with at least, there are, I think, plans for 2 others, which bring together all the clinical and psychological interventions necessary to treat with our youngsters in that way. So I want to strongly counteract this narrative that there is no coordinated effort of the government. There is a study, Madam Speaker, done by Capri, and it looked at the government's intervention strategy between 2007 to 2018. It's a 10-year study. And that study concluded, Madam Speaker, that close to 70% of the budget for intervention did not reach to the target who needed it, the young people. So we did, and that is why we mainstream the budget into the agencies that are already paid to deliver those services. And that is why, under this strategy, we are able to have institutional development, as you are seeing with the police. There's no question, no one can question the investment in the institutional development of the police force. That is why you're seeing an expansion in the outreach of the Ministry of Justice in a coordinated and strategic way with the justice centers, with mediation. That is why you're seeing greater output from the Ministry of Education in dealing with our young people, particularly through the CPFSA. That is why you're seeing interventions being targeted through JISTV with the zones of special operations. So this false notion must be destroyed in the minds of the public. Now, Madam Speaker, there is the argument being preferred, again, another smokescreen. We must bring the evidence. Bring the evidence. Look, when as legislators, we cannot legislate by emotion. Right? We can't just get up one day and say, we don't like this and therefore. We have to look at the problem from an objective way. We have to be objective in our analysis of the problem. Madam Speaker, the notion that somehow we are going to be warehousing people in our jails. Jamaica has the lowest incarceration rate in the region. The lowest incarceration rate. Now let's just establish, the government is not saying that incarceration is the answer. That's not the argument. Hold on. Relative to other jurisdictions of similar profile of Jamaica, and when you compare our sentencing, different business from jails. Now, when you compare our sentencing system, again, Jamaica is not we don't have the strongest sentences. There is value, a deterrence value, in a system of penalties that have strong deterrent effect. There's no question about that. And that is why you have this strong and overwhelming call, which I'm certain the member from St. Mary Western is going to again make his plea to this House regarding going to even greater extremes. The truth is that we need to revise our sentencing regime to bring it in line with the magnitude of the problem that we have. Now let's look at the numbers. How many youngsters we have charged for murder over the last, say, 5 years? You have the number? Just remind me, what's the number? You have it there? No, I just want to know. You are saying, the truth is, you have the number there? From 2019. So from last year, none. From 2022 onwards. So from 2019 to 2022, we have 79 youngsters. Under 18. Under 18. Under 18. I'm going based on the context of the member from Southeast. 17 and under, yeah. Have been arrested for murder. Yeah. It is a significant number over 3 years for youngsters. Certainly we would want it to be much lower. But I would not say that this represents a crisis situation over 3 years. And I would say that in the last 2 years, the numbers have been actually lower. No, I don't have that data. I'm just saying arrested. Now, I will get you that evidence. I will get you that data. Now, Madam Speaker, we have put in place a commission to study this issue of violence generally, but in particular, this issue of youth violence. And I agree that it is something that you can't use hard policing measures to solve. You have to pay attention to the underpinning social issues. There is no question about that. But at the same time, Madam Speaker, the government must take a comprehensive approach. And our approach, I think, it's far more comprehensive than we have ever had. Far more comprehensive and strategic than we have ever had. These 79 youngsters, which from 2019 to 2022 would have been arrested for murders. I am certain that after the passage of this bill, and they get the understanding of what the consequence of their actions are, in the same way that we are already seeing increased recovery of firearms, but a reduction as well in shootings. In other words, the new Firearms Act, which has adjusted upward the penalties, we are already starting to see the impact of the legislation on the decisions of our young people in relation to firearm crimes. And you're going to see that reverberate right throughout the society. The stiffer penalties, the stronger penalties, the adjusted penalty regimes will have a deterrent effect on crime and criminals in the country. So I urge the members opposite to give credit to the policies of the government and to acknowledge them. And where, Madam Speaker, any of them may be having any challenge in accessing any service, or they don't know of any service, it's a simple matter, Madam Speaker, of just reaching out with a phone call. And you have called me, you can call the minister, to any of us, and we can point you in the right direction. We can point you in the right direction. So, Madam Speaker, I rest my case.
You talk about plenty of things women ask, and you know you women ask. Where is the evidence? No. Of the 79, what were their sentences? Find out. And find out if they were light sentences. No, but it would have been sentenced after the previous.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The debate today on these three bills, which are to do with sentencing policy in legislation, debate has expanded to issues around the effectiveness of the overall approach to the government in trying to tackle the terrible problem Jamaica has with violent crime. The truth of the matter is that those of us who live in or who represent constituencies with communities that have high levels of violent crime, our experience tells us that there is an inadequacy of state response to that problem. That's something we experience week in, week out. There was a time, for example, when the Peace Management Initiative was active in the corporate area in Spanish Town, St. Catherine, and so on, and where one could rely on their trained violence interrupters and their process to come into a community and assist in diffusing conflicts that have arisen and which are threatening to spiral into a series of reprisals, to try and nip that in the bud, so to speak. They have been totally defunded, and they no longer effectively exist. The Violence Prevention Alliance isn't able to play that role. The police, through the Department of the Police that deals with community policing, from time to time, they will have these, what they call widely publicized public meetings in communities where there have been problems. And they bring in other agencies to be there. Sometimes the fire department is there. Sometimes the local inspector will be there. Member of Parliament may be there, and so on. And the community gets to be present, and questions are asked, and so on. But the reality is that those events really have little impact on the gang violence or the kind of high level of conflict in the community among gunmen that is a real problem that needs to be addressed. So the comment that says that the state really hasn't effectively addressed these problems yet is a valid point, and I don't think our experience suggests that we can accept the arguments that have been put forward by the other side today, that there are adequate and effective remedies being proposed or rolled out by the government in this regard. Indeed, were it so that the state's responses are fulsome and well-designed and adequate, the private sector wouldn't have to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on Project STAR to try and make a difference in this very area of life in specific communities. And the Project STAR, initiative is something that we commend the private sector for, and I'm not criticizing them. We have not at all. In fact, we have participated. I have participated in I've participated in events that they have put on, and I strongly support their initiative. But the point is that it is because of the failure of the state to play that role in an adequate and effective way that the private sector has to be stepping in to fill that breach. That is a reality. That is a reality. And no amount of howling and so on can undermine the reality of that. So getting more specific to the bill now. The bill seeks to impose higher mandatory minimum sentences for the crime of murder. Higher, substantially higher. Now, there have been for a very long time mandatory minimum sentences for the crime of murder. Our crime of murder recognizes murders in certain circumstances set out in law which attract the potential death penalty, or if it is not imposed, sentence for life, life imprisonment, and other categories of murder where life imprisonment can be imposed or a term of imprisonment for a specific number of years. And where a term of imprisonment is imposed, there is a minimum below which the court cannot go. And it is that which is being increased. And it is being increased very substantially from, I think, 20 years to 50 years in the case of capital murder, and from 15 years as a mandatory minimum to, I believe it's 45 years for non-capital murder. Now, that is a decision that this Parliament is taking, and the majority are in favor of it. As I said before, when I think these bills were first tabled, my position on that is, personally, I do not like mandatory minimum sentencing, because as somebody who is a lawyer by training, I believe that it is important in our system of governance, where we have a separation of powers between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, it is important that the judiciary be unfettered in playing their role of adjudicating justice in the particular case before the court. And that is a fundamental role that they play. So what we are here in Parliament making law, and when we impose a mandatory minimum sentence, what we're saying is, regardless of what happens in a particular case, if someone is charged for this offense, the judge has to impose a sentence of at least this minimum amount. And that used to be 15 years for non-capital murder. It could be life, and it was often somewhere in between. Now it is going to be, I believe it's 45, the Joint Select Committee says it's a minimum of 45 years or up to life. And for capital murder, a minimum of 50 years or up to life. Then there's the whole issue of parole. Now, parole is not a right. Parole is something that's granted at the discretion of the parole board and cannot be applied for before a certain portion of your sentence has been served. What the legislation also seeks to do is to say that you are not eligible for parole. You can't apply for parole until you've served a much longer period of time, whether it be for capital or non-capital murder. The effect of this is going to be that the prison population, unless crime, the rates of crime in this country substantially change from where they have been, you're going to have a growing prison population because the duration of the sentences is going to be much longer. We already have heavily overcrowded prisons, especially maximum security prisons. Overcrowded prisons. Our prisons are old. The two main prisons that we have, Tower Street Correctional Facility, better known as GP, and St. Catherine District Prison, are both very old facilities. they are they have serious structural problems, and they are heavily overcrowded. And that situation is going to be worsened by these very high, long mandatory minimum sentences. It also has the effect, apart from the justice side of it, which I've expressed my concern about, which is that it takes away the ability of the judge to look at the facts of the particular case, the circumstances of the case, and impose a sentence that that judge feels is appropriate. That is being, to some extent, curtailed and restricted because there's a floor imposed by Parliament below which the judge cannot go. And it's a very high floor under this legislation. Very high floor. But apart from that, the impact of these very high mandatory minimum sentences on accused persons is that they are going to be, and are already, increasingly reluctant to plead guilty on the basis that the court can award a discount to them that would make sense for them to accept their responsibility for what they did and go and serve time at the discounted amount that the court has imposed. Rather, the incentive is go to trial, take your chances, and depending on how serious a criminal it is, there are other problems in terms of obstruction of justice, which the system has to contend with, where people are going to trial, interference with witnesses, etc., etc. So there are real downside risks for Parliament to be imposing a regime of very high mandatory minimum sentences. We've done it for firearms, and we've seen already in the court system what is happening in terms of the buildup of cases there in the gun court and circuit courts. And we are now doing it for murder. So these are some of the policy decisions that the government has taken, which have, I think, significant downside risks that we ought to really reflect on in making these decisions. I'm going to turn to the actual provisions in the bill, because I must say I have some concerns. In the amendment to the Child Care and Protection Act, the bill that amends the Child Care and Protection Act seeks to repeal Section 78 of the existing Act and put a new Section 78 in place. And that new Section 78, subsection 3A1, in relation to a capital offense, says that a person who is an adult at sentencing, but who was a child at the time that the offense was committed, is subject to a penalty of 50 years imprisonment. That's the minimum. And the court may specify that the child is not eligible for parole before serving 20 years. So what this does is that it treats a person who offended when they were a child as subject to the same minimum penalty of 50 years imprisonment as a person who committed that offense as an adult. Now, this runs against what is now, I think, internationally accepted policy, that children, when they come into conflict with the law, are to be treated by the court system in a more sympathetic way than how adults are. And the reason for that, of course, is because the kind of issues that children and adolescents in particular are grappling with, and the bad choices that children make because their cognitive skills are not fully developed until they're adults, means that imposing very harsh mandatory minimum sentences is unfair and unwise as a response to how you deal with a child. The new section 78(3)(a)(3) applies to an offender who is a child who has attained the age of 14 years. And it says that that child who has achieved or attained the age of 14 years is subject to, and commits a murder, is subject to a minimum penalty of 50 years imprisonment and the court may specify that the child is not eligible for parole before serving 20 years. So, it's applying the same regime to a child who is before the court and being sentenced, who is between the ages of 14 and 17 years old, and who may have committed that offense when they were under 14 years. It says, read the provision. It says that when they are before the court as a child who has attained the age of 14, this is a regime that should apply to them. But when they committed the offense, they may have been under the age of 14. That is what it says. That is what it says. Look at it. Now, it may be that there's an ambiguity in the wording of the provision, but it can be read in that way. And I think that's a problem. So the new section 78(3)(a)(2) applies where the offense is capital murder and the offender is under the age of 14. So this is another limb of this now, where the offender is under the age of 14. And I assume that means at the time they're being sentenced. On the other hand, the new section 78(4) applies where the child under the age of 14 commits an offense specified in the fourth schedule. But the fourth schedule includes murder. So you have two parallel tracks dealing with children who are under 14 when they commit murder. You have one under 78(4), and you have one under 78(3)(a) Roman 2. How those two operate at the same time is unclear to me. And I think that's problematic. The new section 78(5) applies where a child of 14 or more years is convicted of non-capital murder. And it says that a child is subject to a minimum penalty of 30 years imprisonment. And the court may specify that the child is not eligible for parole before serving 15 years. Again, this can be read as applying even if the child who is being sentenced was less than 14 years when the offense was committed, because it's speaking in the present tense to the child before the court who is being sentenced and has attained 14 or more years. But what about their age when they committed the offense? That must be brought into account. So in my view, these provisions in the new Section 78 of the Child Care and Protection Act, as amended by this bill, are arguably incompatible with the right of every child to such measures of protection as are required by virtue of the status of being a minor or as part of the family, society, and state, which Section 13(3)(k) of the Constitution guarantees, and is therefore arguably unconstitutional. I'm concerned that the new Section 78 violates the Constitution, and I'm saying it here because we are sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, and I do not like to pass legislation which may be unconstitutional. And our children are given rights under the Constitution to measures of protection as are required by virtue of being a minor. Furthermore, to impose these long mandatory minimum sentences on persons who offend when they are children, and possibly even offend when they are less than 14 years old, is really excessive. 50 years is a very, very long time. 30 years for non-capital murder for a child offender. And it is not in keeping with the spirit and intent of the Child Care and Protection Act. The Child Care and Protection Act was really there to ensure that children are appropriately dealt with when they come into conflict with the law and how the justice system deals with them. And this, I think, is really inconsistent with the spirit and intent of the Child Care and Protection Act, and indeed with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And UNICEF, who is one of our international development partners, specializing, of course, in children, matters related to children, have written of their tremendous concern with this aspect of the legislation. So I'm really asking the Minister of Justice to look again at Section 78 and the amendments, the new Section 78 that this is seeking to impose. I am not aware that there is a sense that persons who commit offenses as children are being sentenced in too lenient a way. I've not heard anybody say that before. I've seen no evidence to suggest it. So I'm really not sure what's behind this. But we're really bringing in some extreme provisions here in relation to how we deal with children who have fallen afoul of the law in a very, they've fallen afoul of the law in a very serious way, and the law must respond appropriately. But mandatory minimum sentencing for children doesn't allow the court to look at the circumstances of that child, look at the circumstances in which the offense was committed, and to fashion an appropriate penalty and supporting regime to enable that child to hopefully be rehabilitated, which is really what ought to happen. If you're sentenced for 50 years minimum, what chance of rehabilitation is there? You know, it's... The other point I want to make, Minister, Madam Speaker, relates to the amendment to the Criminal Justice Administration Act. And it's dealing with the regime of discounts that are available if you plead guilty. And where somebody is pleading guilty to an offense which would attract a life sentence, for the purpose of working out what the discount would be and what the sentence should be that is imposed, you have to deem that offense to be subject to a certain number of years. And what the legislation is saying here in the new 42F as amended is 50 years. 50. And I'm glad you said that, Minister, because my recommendation is that should be 45 years. And let me tell you why. Because the effect of it, if you plead guilty at the earliest opportunity that you can, which is what we want to encourage people to do if they're guilty, the 1/3 discount that is available would take you to, if it's a 45-year deemed thing, would take you to 30 years, which is the minimum sentence for non-capital murder. So it would be a coherent system. If it's at 50, a 1/3 of 50 is actually higher than the minimum. So you're incentivizing them to go to trial rather than incentivizing them to plead guilty. So if you put the deemed number of years that's applicable or is treated as being equivalent to a life sentence at 45 rather than 50, you have a coherent system.
Assist the leader of the opposition and colleagues. I'm not closing today, but I want to just we have not in this legislation excluded the plea bargaining act. Right. And one of the good things about high sentence, which I will explain when I close, it might encourage most of them to plead guilty, which is what happened in the United States. You're with me? In other words, we may not be imposing the criminal administration that, discount. But once they plead guilty, they're in a position to engage in plea bargaining. So it could be in the sentence once it is agreed with the judge.
Yeah. Thank you, Minister. And I understand that point. I'm just simply saying, since you are amending Section 42F, if you chose 45 years rather than 50, the effect of it would be that the incentive would still be to plead guilty rather than to take a chance at trial. Well, those provisions are still going to be in the law, so we may as well make them coherent. So, Madam Speaker, I have real concerns about the treatment of Section 78 of the Child Care and Protection Act. I understand the desire in sentencing persons who commit offenses as adults. especially the offense of murder, capital and non-capital, that the government wants to send a signal by imposing much higher mandatory minimum sentences than existed before. I understand that sentiment. The hope is that it will have a deterrent effect. That remains to be seen. I want to bring to Parliament's attention the downside risks of that approach, which are much heavier problems of overcrowding in the prisons, greater pressure on the prison population. Chances are that there will be greater burdens of courts in the, of cases in the criminal justice system, because persons are facing high mandatory minimum sentences and therefore are less inclined to plead guilty and more inclined to take their chances with trial in an environment where we know that witness intimidation and worse is a real problem, and even jury interference is a problem. So we're putting much greater stresses on the system, the criminal justice system, both in trial process and in the correctional facilities when we take this approach. And I wanted to mention it in Parliament because I mentioned it in the context of the firearms legislation, only to hear from the Minister of National Security, I think in December, that amendments are being brought, which we haven't seen yet, because of the very issues I raised then. And the other thing I wanted to put on record was my own concern about an approach, not so much in the context of murder, because we've always had mandatory minimum sentences, although the levels are being doubled or thereabouts. But we've seen it in the context of firearms. I don't know what else the government is going to come with. Essentially, we're seeing a trend of taking away of judicial discretion over sentencing and giving Parliament a say rather than the judges a say. And that is not the way our system is supposed to operate. And I'm not aware of any evidence that suggests that our judges are not sentencing appropriately. They can sentence up to life, and they often give very heavy sentences. So the claim is being made. The claim is being made, but the Prime Minister didn't have the data on the sentencing patterns for those children. He had data on how many children had been charged between 2019 and 2022, but the sentencing aspect of it, we didn't have that data. So I'm just saying that from my perspective, this is a trend that I'm seeing, and it is a trend which goes against the normal, well-established principles of separation of powers and the very important role that judges have to play, which is to ensure that they do justice in the case before them. The victims are there, and the victims and the families of the victims must have a say and must be able to, and they are able to give a statement so that the court has their views to take into account. But the range of circumstances in which people offend varies widely. A former criminal lawyer, once upon a time a distinguished criminal lawyer before he started to do all this conveyancing and so on. You know that, Minister. You know that. You know, it's a vicious serial killer is at one end. And then you have at the other end a youngster who gets into bad company and has no prior record and gets into a situation and does something stupid, and somebody is killed by it. And you can't treat them in the same way. You can't, because they're not the same circumstances. One can be rehabilitated, and even forgiveness, you may not forget, but forgiveness is an important part of the healing of victims and their families as well. And they want to see an appropriate sentence, but the consciousness of our people can be elevated to the level where people get closure from having seen that justice done, and justice includes a proportionate response to what took place. Proportionality is vital. So, Madam Speaker, those are my submissions. I hope that the Minister will have another look at the new Section 78 very carefully in the context of the right of the child under the Constitution that I mentioned here, and the international treatment and requirements of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child that Jamaica is a signatory to, and which indeed led to the Child Care and Protection Act being enacted. I wouldn't want to see us go down a route that we later have to backtrack on and wheel and come again. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister, I know you're not closing, so House Leader.
I beg to move that the debate be suspended for another sitting of the House. May it please you.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader.
It's not intended to do any further business for the day. And just at the point, Madam Speaker, of the motion for adjournment, I just wish to restate that next Tuesday, the 30th, we begin officially the sectoral debate, and the appropriate motion will then be moved for that debate to continue through to somewhere about the middle of June. It is intended to have the House meeting 2 days, if possible, depending, of course, on the flow. And also, Madam Speaker, it is our intention to work through the private members' motions and also to deal with question and answer to questions during this session. Madam Speaker, I beg to move, therefore, that the House be adjourned until Tuesday, April 30 at 2 p.m. at the George William Gordon House. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thanks, House Leader. The question is that the House do now adjourn for Tuesday, April 30, 2024. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned.